Hey Aria, what do we got today?
Boss pedals. We got synthesizer, space echo, and slicer.
Perfect. Have you ever looked at all the gear musicians use and wonder, how does it all work? My name's Dustin, and my family and I are setting out on a quest to inspire both adult and kid musicians to create new sounds together and learn all about what it takes to produce great music. We'd like to invite you along on the journey as we explore the gear professional studios, musicians, and hobbyists use to create their art. We'll take a close-up look at the gear and ask,
What's this button do?
hello and welcome to this week's episode of What's This Button Do? I'm your host, Dustin, and this week kicks off our first week of the Summer Palen Pedal Pickin Challenge episodes. For those who have not been watching the show, each week on the show, I have my daughter, Aria, pick out 3 pedals. She gets to pick the order that I put them in, and I try to use all 3 of them at once to make the guitar sound cool. And this has been just an experiment to help us find new sounds, inspire us, create new ways to play. So this summer, we're going to be doing some themed episodes. So every episode is going to have a different theme. I'm going to be traveling around to some of the different Palen musics in the Midwest and doing some live episodes as well, where we're going to pick some pedals out in the shop and let other people try this and show the results. We'll have some contests and some fun. So for those of you who want to play along at home, have a family member, a friend, anyone who's not familiar with guitar, just pick a few of your pedals out, let them pick the order, and then just play around with it till you find a sound where all 3 of them look good. If you do, make sure you share it on social media, tag me, tag Palen Music, because we're going to be talking about some fan ones as well as we travel around this summer. But please play along with us. It's a lot of fun. We would really love to have you join us. Now, this week's theme is something that I know a lot of you are not expecting from me. We are going to talk about Boss pedals. And I know what you're thinking the second I say that. Most of you who have seen the show before know our studio has a lot of boutique gear in here, got a lot of weird off-the-wall pedals. You haven't heard me talk a lot about the mainstream pedals out there. But that does not mean that I do not appreciate them and absolutely love them. So I think it is important that we talk a little bit about Boss before we do the pedal picking challenge today, because a lot of older guitarists like me, we grew up on Boss pedals. Those were almost all of us probably had a Boss TU tuner, and we probably had a Boss OD1 or a Boss DS1 distortion, or for those who were into the metal scene, HM2. Like, we've all had a Boss pedal at one point in time or the others. And a lot of people who are in the boutique world have kind of looked at Boss as like, oh, well, that's kind of a starter pedal. Like, let's do other things. But when you really stop to look at it, so much of the boutique world and so much of the things that are created out there are based on things that Boss have done over the years. They have created some of the greatest pedals of all time, have been featured on almost every major record out there. If you hear a record that has guitar in it from 1970 all the way on up, it probably had a Boss pedal in there somewhere in the film. Well, I guess not 70, but since Boss's inception, basically there has been a Boss pedal on just about every album out there. So to say that Boss pedals are inferior or too inexpensive or too cheap, just not true. So over the years, I've had several. I don't have a massive collection of Boss pedals like some people do. There are people out there that have collected every single model out there. There's so much variety and so many changes, but I have saved on to some of my favorites over the years. And something recently has happened that I've noticed. A lot of the newer Boss pedals that are coming out are some of the most high fidelity, absolutely amazing pedals that I have ever seen. Recently, they took a new twist on their old octave pedal, the OC2. They added the OC5, which is honestly, in my opinion, one of the best octave pedals that has ever been made. Truly, truly fantastic. We'll feature that on an episode someday. And then you saw a few episodes back, I did a little talk about the Boss Waza tube expander, which was not a pedal. It was a machine that lets you actually go direct with your amplifiers and acts as a load box as well, so you can control as a master volume. But that Boss Waza label is something that's been fairly new over the last 10 years. The Waza line is actually Boss's kind of boutique line. It is their take on old pedals that have been discontinued, that are no longer available in the Boss standard lineup. And they're going back, retweaking old fan favorites and reissuing them under the Waza name. And what's really cool is they're adding new feature sets, making them sound better, just taking something that was already amazing and making it better. They did that with the Dimension Chorus, which is one of my always on pedals on my pedal board. I think that is one of the best pedals of all time. It's not really a chorus. I mean, it functions as that matter, but really it's just this amazing tone sweetener that just adds a little movement. Absolutely gorgeous. And then recently they did a take on the old FC1, and this is the FC1W, one of the best fuzz pedals out there. Just super versatile, amazing sounding, really inexpensive. That's what I love, is Boss's prices haven't gotten out of control. They do a fantastic job of giving you the best bang for your buck out there. So I asked Aria this week to, when she picked pedals for the Pedal Pickin' Challenge, to go to my Boss drawer over in the cabinet and just pick out 3 pedals. So my hope secretly was that maybe she'd pick out the OC5 and maybe the DD-200, which is one of my favorite delays. But what she gave us is something completely crazy. She picked what might be 2 of the craziest pedals in the lineup and one of my favorites. So we're going to jump into the Pedal Pickin' Challenge. I'm going to let Aria introduce it, and then we'll dive into these and see what kind of sounds we make. I warn you, this is going to get weird. I have no doubt in my mind about it. We're going to have fun with this one. All right, we'll see you over at the pedal board. Hey, Aria, what do we got today?
Boss pedals. We got synthesizer, space echo, and slicer.
Perfect. Okay, today on the Pedal Pickin' Challenge, we're going to be hitting these Boss pedals. I am going to be using my trusty Scythe. This is seriously like the OH10 Jaguar-esque guitar. Fantastic. It's got a mastery trim on there, some Scythe wound pickups. Just truly one of my favorite guitars. I have beat this thing up, but it's one of the first Scythes I ever owned. Absolutely amazing. I don't know if the camera can capture this, the relicking and the checking that's in this, but they do such a good job, and I've beaten it up a little bit more. It's had a few drops and dings over the years, but truly one of my favorite guitars of all time. But I think this will sound really good with what we're doing. These pedals that Aria picked out are some interesting ones. I think we're going to have a lot of fun here. Let's take a look at the lineup. So we're going to look at the board here. So we've got the Boss SY-200. Now this is an updated take on the SY-1, which whenever Boss does a 200 pedal, it's essentially a slightly bigger than a normal Boss pedal, but has several pedals worth of goods mixed into it. So they added all sorts of different synthesizer functionality into this. It goes way beyond what the original synth pedal could do. They even added features from their slicer into this. Now, ironically, Aria also chose the new reissue of the slicer pedal as well. So we're going to have 2 pedals that do a lot of slicing and dicing. That is going to get very interesting really quickly. So we've got the SY-200 with a ton of different options. I am not going to go through everything that this pedal can do because that would take us hours and you would get bored. I'm going to show you, I think we're just going to use presets. We'll flip through those and I'll show you some of the different sounds that you can make with this. And then we'll kind of go from there to take a look at the different things. Now, next up, we've got the Boss RE-202. Now, this is one of my personal favorite pedals from Boss. This thing is an absolute beast. This is based on the old RE-201 Space Echo, which there's a couple of those in my studio. We've talked about those before. Truly one of my favorite effects of all time. They did such a good job of recreating that pedal, or all those features that are in there, in this box. It is, I cannot say enough good things about it, but we'll talk about it when we hear it on here in just a little bit. And then we also have the Slicer SL-2. Now this is Boss's, one of their most new pedals. It used to be this huge box. And the idea with the Slicer was to take little samples of what you were playing and create syncopated rhythm. So you could, in a way, use it as its own kind of rhythm box and create these really cool rhythmic samples of what you're doing. It was totally unique, kind of hard to use. It was very hard to find that right rhythm with it. But people who played with it just absolutely loved it, and it was super fun. But it was a big box, and like I said, a little hard to dial in. They have consolidated that feature set into a smaller footprint and put some of the coolest sounds on here. I am so in love with this pedal. Like, it does some just absolutely neat things. So we're going to talk about that as well, and what you can do with this. So we'll kind of walk through those settings, talk about them. So what we do with the Pedal Pickin Challenge, for those of you who are new to this, is I am going to show you a little bit of each pedal, demonstrate how they work, let you know, kind of the ins and outs, and then from there we'll actually turn all three of them on and create a sound out of there. So let's take a look at the pedals, and we're going to figure this out. All right, we are going to take a look at the SY-200 first. So I'm going to walk you through some of my favorite presets on here, let you hear the sounds of them. First of all, I'm going to let you just hear the guitar by itself so you can kind of hear my clean tone. All right, so there's an idea of what the clean tone from just the Scythe OH10 sounds like. Now, we're going to walk through several different things on the SY-200. The first one is one of my favorite sounds of all time, the ring mod. Here we go. I'm going to turn the loop on. Now, ring mods, I know some people love them, some people hate them. They are usually a pain to dial in. The ring mod that comes set up on the SY-200 is one of the coolest ring mod tones I have ever heard. Now, did you hear something there? It responds to pick attack. It also responds to vibration in your fingers. It also responds to a whammy bar. It's super, super sensitive. So it responds to your pick attack, and what's really cool is it's polyphonic, so you can play chords on there. You don't have to just play single notes, so very, very sensitive in the way that it works, and it just sounds wicked. All right, now we'll go up to another favorite of mine. This is kind of an interesting one. Definitely synthy kind of strings. Notice again, it responds to the vibrato in your fingers. Very organy. I love this for intros and for some cool parts of songs. It can be really, really fun. And then there's like a little bank in here that's really fun in the 70s. These are different organs. See? And then this is really fun. This is one of my favorites. I really love it with chords. I think with chords it just sounds absolutely beautiful. I love that sound. So that's a fun series. Now we're going to get into some of the stuff that it can do that's very slicer-esque before we even get to the slicer in a little bit. But this is a really, really fun pattern. So what that's doing, it's kind of like a tremolo effect, but it's not a true tremolo because you can even hear that little background loop there. what it's doing is taking little snippets of what I played, chopping them up and repeating them over and over and over again. See, it's got that really, really cool pattern to it, but it gives you this cool rhythmic response that's almost like a step sequencer. But to give you a difference, let's jump up to a sequencer. It's 117 if I remember right. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. So there's a true step sequencer. You can hear that repetition. Now, what I love about these sequencers in here, you can still hear that little bit of a repeat in the background, but for the most part, when you've got your palm mute going on, you're killing that sound. And you can change the sensitivity settings into the pedal when you do a little deep dive into it. That'll let you actually mix it up a little bit, but very, very cool. Like, I just love the way that it sounds. And then my last one we're going to cover, this is one of my favorite sequences of all time. So if I let it ring, you can hear it's going to create this rhythm, right? But if I'm doing single notes, I can kind of... So see how I could change the timing of it? Even though it's got a set rhythmic pattern, by the way that I play it, I can actually affect that rhythm and change it a little bit. Very, very cool, very fun. It's something different. Never really had a sequencer pedal that sounded quite like that. So I love that sequence. In fact, we'll leave it on there probably to start off with. We'll see. So now that's great. Let's talk a little bit about this, though. This is that RE-202. Now, there's two versions of this pedal. There's a small format one and there's the big format. The big format captures like all of the knobs that you would normally have on an RE-202. This is a little bit different layout, but very, very similar to that. And then the smaller one kind of puts them into smaller dials, similar to what you have on the slicer over here, where you have the little knobs on top of knobs. So this is a little easier to lay out and control. But what you have in this rotary dial is you've got 4 different heads on the Space Echo. So a 1 is just a really short. You can hear that. The 2 is just a little bit longer. Cool. 3, a little bit longer even. And then 4. Is your reverb. So you hear that? You can hear that little stutter effect there. So now, watch this. This is really cool. So when we start blending them together, you can turn on head 2 and 3. My favorite is head 1 and 3. Now, I've got the reverbs turned down on the amps right now that we're using because I wanted you to hear the reverb that's actually built into the Space Echo. It's got its own very springy echo in there. I like to run it right around here. Just really gorgeous. Now you can max it out. And unlike the originals, if you did that on an original Space Echo RE-201, it's too much. It overloads the reverb tank. This does not. This won't overload it. It just makes it a little bit like the spring is tight wound and you really, really are hearing that spring. There's not a lot of reason to go that high. Occasionally, if you want to do a kind of cool effect, you can. And then the more intensity and the more repeats that you put onto it, the more it really affects that. You can hear it going into oscillation there. So it can create this ethereal sound if you have that reverb turned all the way up. I like to back it back down and go a little bit less there. And then over here you have your bass and your treble. Now on a standard RE-201, you're usually setting these right about here and just forgetting about it. Even maxed all the way out, it's not a major effect. It's more for the actual echoes themselves, not to really affect your tone a massive amount. It's not like an EQ where it's going to make your bass out or treble out. None of that's really massively affected. Where on the units themselves, they can be a little bit more pushy, so there's no real bad setting on here, even if we turn it all the way down. You can hear it just makes the echoes a little bit quieter, but nothing major there. So we'll just set them where I normally would set them on there. And then down here you have your saturation rate and you have your intensity. Now, this is really interesting with the rate. Hear how fast that rate can be? Now watch this. Based on this, you can create a long, intense oscillation, or you can take it back. And just create this really nice, beautiful sound. So it does sound a lot like the original Space Echo. And by turning up the saturation knob up here, almost like turning up the preamp on the original pedal, so you get a little more drive in there. I like to roll with it kind of toward the middle. And then you can also age the tape so that it's not a perfect repeat. We've talked about this in previous episodes, how sometimes clockwork repeats don't sound natural. When you get a little age on there, that's something that people love about an old RE-201, is it starts sounding a little bit muddy, a little bit warmer. So it can be really, really fun. Then the other thing that the original Echo did not have was a tap tempo. So you can hear that, and it will work with all of the different settings. Very, very, very cool to be able to just tap in what you want it to do. I love that. Then you also have line inputs too. If you want to use this with other devices besides a guitar, you can do that as well, which is really cool. So we'll mess around with this in a second as we do our final, but I do want to touch on the slicer for a second. We already talked a little bit about this, about how it works, but I want you to hear it in action. So what they've done on the slicer is they've got several different modes on here that you can switch around to. So we'll just kind of start here and work our way around. And then each mode has another 11 possible settings that give you different patterns, different rhythms, if you will, that you can repeat. And then you can control the time, you can control the way that the attack happens. So you can hear that little stutter step. Really cool. And now we'll change the tempo up. So it changes up what happens there. So it's doing the same thing, chopping it up, but it's doing it in different orders. Now, if we change what's happening here, got a little R2D2E sound. Very, very cool. And like I said, that's really cool. Now, over here, this is a little bit more pulsating. You can really hear that bass kind of coming through. Now notice, you're not losing my original actual sound of the guitar. It's just adding that pulsation on top of it. So you get some really, really neat effects doing this. And I want to show you. You can get crazy with this. You can do single notes, chords, just really crazy what you can do. And then I want to show you a couple of the other settings on here, because these are a little bit more moderate, kind of almost a tremolo sound to it. So it's not just about crazy over-the-top effects. You can get a lot of usable, everyday musical effects, almost like a harmonic tremolo. And then, I love this one. See, just beautiful as a nice little accompaniment. You can really use this to create some fun sounds. Now, this is not a set it and forget it type pedal. Unless you've just got one song that you're using it on and you put it on there and lock it into place, it's definitely one that takes experimenting with. It takes dialing it in. We're going to have to just mess around until we find something that we like based on what it is. So you can hear, there is some of the kookiest sound. So we'll activate it last and we'll kind of dial it into whatever we're using and just try to find a sound that really works with it. So it'll be interesting. So although now I'm biting myself in the foot, I said we're going to use the 120 sequencer. So that's going to be really fun to dial in with the slicer, but I don't care. We're going to do it. Let's accept the challenge. So let's turn on these two first and we'll get them dialed in and we'll add in the slicer. Now, okay, instantly, I want you to hear that. That was freaking cool. So here's what the 120 sounded like by itself. Now, notice when I'm playing on my lower three strings, so the E, A, and D strings, I can affect the sound a lot. When you get up into the higher octave ranges, like if you're up on your high E string, notice it's not giving you that low end bass sound. So it really does change the tone depending on where you're at on the neck. So when you're writing a song, you really want to choose where you're going to be at. I like to sit right in here in the A area and do songs in A when I'm using this, so that's what we're going to do. But now, watch what happens. You've heard it by itself. Now that we have a little bit of reverb going on and just a little echo, watch what happens. Okay, I'm going to tap to it. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, yep, already loaded that. That's got an industrial sound. I'm going to turn the reverb down just a little bit. Let's turn our rate up just a little, and we're going to turn the intensity up just slightly. Saturation I'm really happy with. So let's see. now we'll add in the slicer. Let's see if we can find a slice that sounds really good with it. That's how it works. See what we got here. Nah, it's still a little distracting. Yeah, there we're getting into it. I am really, really loving this. Let's mess with this. Yeah, I think that's the tone right there. All right, I hadn't got to mess with that slicer very much, and that was a ton of fun. There is so much buried in that box that you can really enjoy. I hope that gives you some ideas of some fun ways to combine Boss pedals, and not to be afraid to do a synthesizer mixed with a slicer. I know that was a weird combination. I would have never picked those three pedals to go together, but gotta say, kind of glad Aria picked them. I really, really, really dug that sound. Something completely different, totally unique, and that's the fun of the Palen Pedal Pickin Challenge. The idea is to get out of your comfort zone and try something new. So hope you enjoyed that. Be sure, if you're playing along at home, tag us in your socials. My Instagram handle is What's This Button Do Dustin. Please tag me, tag Palen Music, and more importantly, make sure you put the hashtag Palen Pedal Pickin Challenge. We'll put those hashtags down below as well, so that we know you're out there and following along with us. We'll be sharing some of our favorite examples in future episodes, and in a few weeks, I'll be doing my first live show at one of the Palen stores, so be watching Instagram and the Palen feeds for information on when and where that is going to be happening. Next, we'll be back with another Palen Pedal Pickin Challenge, and Aria is going to be picking from some really, really weird pedals, so we'll see what she picks with some tube preamps and stuff. So come join us next week. Hope you have a wonderful week. Take care. We'll see you soon. Oh, that's freaking cool. All right, this is going to be fun. Let's try one more thing.